Hello, students. I'm so glad that you're here with me to learn something new today. We are starting a new series this week called Rooted, and it's really a set of lessons that are designed to help us get through one of the hardest things that, we as humans deal with, which is change. And you've probably already dealt with change at different times in your life when you started a new school or when something happened in your life. But right now, you are probably going through one of the weirdest changes that you've probably ever been through. And of course, we're all going through it together, apart. We don't even know exactly how it's going to feel on the other side of these changes, but there's definitely a lot of change. It's just something we can't avoid in life, and that's why we need to learn to handle it well. So as we turn to the teaching today, that you'll learn some things from it that help you as you navigate these changes, and I look forward to seeing you tonight at our Zoom hangout where we can talk about it some more and play some games too. So I'm looking forward to seeing you.
We're starting a new series today called Rooted, where we'll be talking about one of the things that all of us have to deal with in our lives. It's one thing we just can't avoid, and that's why we need to learn how to handle it well.
I'm sure you've experienced at least some kind of change in your life. We all have before, and we all will again. That's why we're going to spend the next 3 weeks talking about just that, change. You don't need me to tell you that change is happening all the time for you. You're experiencing all kinds of changes in this phase of life. Some good and some bad, and some, awkward.
Think about it. There will be more independence, more opportunities, more trust, more things to try, and more people to get to know. And those things all mean change. And those kinds of changes aren't all that bad. They're easy to deal with because they're changes we want to happen.
But unfortunately, there are other kinds of changes that come during this phase of life. Changes that we didn't choose and can't control. And they are the ones most of us don't like all that much. Like when you think everything is okay in your family, and then your parents announce that they're getting a divorce.
Or when you get dumped out of the blue, or your small group split up, or someone close to you passed away, or your best friend suddenly didn't want to be your best friend anymore. Those types of changes, they feel awful.
Some of you may not totally relate because change it's kind of exciting for you. And some of you totally get it because you, like me, hate change. In the middle of it, you feel sad, angry, frustrated, or even confused. In fact, any kind of change, good or bad, leaves you feeling a little insecure and stressed about what's next. You have no idea what's going on and no idea what's going to happen next. That leaves you feeling completely out of control, and nobody likes to feel out of control.
But here's the truth. No matter how we feel about it, change is gonna happen. I'm 100% sure that there will be some wonderful changes that take place in your life. But I'm also 100% sure that there will be some changes you're not going to like. Since that's the case, we need to figure out how to live in a world where change is coming. We need to learn how to stay strong and steady when change happens.
Now, I got some good news for you here. People have been struggling with how to handle change forever. When you open the pages of the Bible and read from the writers God used to tell his story, you'll see that they too struggled with the idea of change. They went through a lot of the same stuff that you're going through: loss, broken relationships, heartbreak, uncertainty, insecurity, and so much more. And many of them wrestled with the question of how they could trust God when their lives seemed to be a constant series of unwanted and unexpected changes.
But over and over again in the Bible, the writers who were dealing with so much change kept coming back to the same truth. And while many of them had a lot to say about dealing with change, I think the author of the book of Hebrews said it best.
Hebrews is a letter written to Christians during that time that included some very practical advice about how to navigate life. The writer gave them a lot of great advice, like to remember to love one another and be kind to strangers, and make sure you don't fall in love with money. But then the writer dropped this incredible piece of information to help them and us deal with a life that can bring so much uncertainty and change. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever.
Did you hear that? Jesus never changes. He's always the same. And in a world marked by constant change, I think that's great news. It means that we have access to the one thing in our lives that never changes, and that's God.
So why is that so important? Let me explain it to you this way. Have you ever seen a huge tree? Maybe you have one in your backyard right now, or you've seen one at a park or on TV. I'm talking about one of those big, sturdy trees with tons of branches and bulky leaves. The perfect tree for climbing, if you ask me. What is it, though, that keeps that tree in the ground? Its roots, right?
That tree is secured into the ground and holds steady in its place because of its roots. So every season when the weather changes, when the wind blows, the ice comes, the rain falls, the sun beams down, the fog covers, the drought hits, that tree isn't moved. With all that change happening around it, it would be easy to think that tree would just fall down and give up. But it doesn't. It's rooted in place no matter what's happening around it.
And that's what an unchanging God does for us. He keeps us rooted. When our eyes are focused on Him, the one who never changes, we're able to stay steady and secure, like a tree that's unshakable and unbreakable in the midst of life's changes.
Think about it like this. Have you ever seen a dancer spin around and around and you wonder how they don't get completely dizzy? With all of the change and movement happening within their body, you'd think that they fall flat on their face, but they don't. Do you know why they're able to stay so stable? It's because they focus their eyes on one spot in the room. As they turn, their gaze doesn't leave that spot. Finding that spot over and over again helps them to avoid dizziness, feeling unstable, and possibly hurting themselves.
And that's exactly how it is when we put our trust and focus on God. He keeps us steady. And when we're safe and stable, when we're rooted with God, we can be confident that our lives will reflect His goodness. The book of Psalm puts it perfectly. They are like trees planted along the riverbank, bearing fruit each season. Their leaves never wither, and they prosper in all they do.
Doesn't that sound like something you want for your life? To be the kind of person whose roots are so deep in God that your life is full and beautiful? The kind of person who will stay strong and secure in all they do?
Remember, God never changes. He is the solid, unmovable ground on which we can root our lives. And that's why, no matter what change is happening around us, we can remain secure when we fix our eyes on Him. God never changes. It was true back then when the writer of Hebrews said it, and it's still true today. But what does that mean for you?
It means that God, who loves you now, will always love you. It means God, who cares for you now, will always care for you. It means God, who is with you now, will always be with you. It means the next time you experience a change in your life, and you will, you don't have to be uprooted by insecurity, fear, or frustration. Instead, you can remain steady and stable by staying rooted in an unchangeable God.
And to help you do that, I want you to try just one thing. I want you to remember. I want you to remember a time that God was faithful to you in the past. I want you to remember a time that you felt God's love in your life. I want you to remember a time that you saw God's goodness. And maybe it was coming to this church and finding your small group. Maybe it was at camp. Or maybe it was when your mom got better after being sick for a long time, or your dad finally got that job. Maybe it was a time something worked out just the way you prayed it would.
Remember those things in your life. Write a few of them down. And then remember that the same God who was there when those things happened is the same God who is with you now. If He was faithful in that circumstance or season of your life, then you can stay rooted in the belief that He will be faithful again.
For those of you who aren't sure what you believe about God or don't know if you've seen Him be faithful, that's okay. Just think about a time in your life something really good happened. Write that down and remember it. Or ask your small group leader to share a story like that from their own life. I know they all have plenty of examples of how God has come through for them in the past. Use those stories as a starting point to consider the fact that God might be working in you and around your life too.
So this week, I want you to remember that God never changes. And because of that, you can stay rooted in Him, even when life changes around you. So as you go, I want you to think about this question.